Hey folks, welcome to this week's Texas Counts weekly update for the week of May 11th. We just opened up the Zoom webinar, so we'll give it a minute or two for folks to hop on the call. But thank you again so much for joining us today, and we'll get started shortly. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone to this week's Texas Counts weekly update. As always, we are joined by the fabulous Dr. Lila Valencia from the Texas Demographic Center, who's going to walk us through the self-response rate in Texas. Then before that, Genesis Sanchez from the LEO will talk to us about the census operations and give us an update on where we're at in Texas. And then I'm very excited because today we will be sharing our Census Day 2.0 plans. And so excited that y'all tuned in for that. And I basically just went through the agenda, but again, welcome everyone to today's weekly update. We'll go through the 2020 census operational updates. We'll look at the data, and then we'll talk about Census Day 2.0. At any time, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to use that chat box. We like to answer those questions in real time as much as possible. So we really appreciate when y'all are interacting with us, and we'll be sure to be monitoring the Facebook Live as well. So if you're tuning in from Facebook, welcome, and we will make sure that we're fielding your questions as well. But without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Genesis to share out about what's going on in operations.
Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Thanks again for joining us. I hope everybody's doing well and celebrated a nice and relaxing Mother's Day weekend. Katie, if we could go to the next slide, please. So today I wanted to just very quickly share what the latest updates are from the Census Bureau regarding update leave. As many of you know, and many of you live it, we have a large update leave population here in Texas. So the Census Bureau, in coordination with federal, state, and local health officials, have decided to return to some of these operations, and they're rolling it out in a kind of a phased way. As of today, Texas is not yet on that list. We unfortunately don't know when Texas will be on the list, but and we don't quite know what the criteria is for having the Census Bureau back in the field. However, when it does happen, we want to make sure to keep you guys updated, and we will be able to do that. So as many of you know, update leave was intended to cover about 5 million housing units in 2020 here in the States. But most of these houses, about 95% of the universe, have not received their packets due to COVID-19. So these employees who go to the doors have received new instructions, which are different from their original instructions pre-pandemic. For example, employees who go to doors to leave a packet won't knock on any doors. Instead, they'll just simply leave a packet on the doorknob. And then they'll update the address by inspecting the property to verify that there are no other housing units on the same property. And then they'll kind of have a master address list to make sure that the address that they have is correct on their list as well. And then they'll also, in addition, receive safety training to observe social distancing measures. And the Census Bureau has ordered PPE for all of their employees, including those who are in the offices and who are in the field. And just as a reminder, since we did get this question a lot and it was really confusing at the beginning of self-response, the Census Bureau has asked that if there are a lot of households in your area that have that are considered update leave, that they wait until they receive their materials to respond with their unique ID. Unfortunately, it may be that some of these households have already responded without a unique ID. They may still go back and give them material. I think one reason for this is that they just want to have consistency. And so, and they still have to do the update part, right? So it's not so much about, in the cases that people are already feeling energetic and want to respond, it's not so much about leaving material, but so much as updating the property. Next slide, please. So this is a map of Texas. I just wanted to point out very quickly, many of you have already toyed around with this, know it very well, but this is a Census Hard to Count map from CUNY. I prefer this one over the Census Bureau's map. It's just a little more intuitive for me, but both maps have a way for you to track what the initial census contact was for these areas. So as you can see, the areas that are in yellow here in Texas are those that were hand-delivered packets, update leave. There are a few, right? I guess I should say that, as you guys can tell, these are a pretty diverse area. And the other thing about the hand-delivered packet is that it is internet choice. So the idea behind it is that the household will hopefully respond via internet first. So all you have to do with this map is when you go down to the bottom right, when you pull up more map features, you just click 2020 census initial contact, and that'll show you where exactly you can kind of tell what the contact is in your area. And then obviously this isn't just one large map of Texas, but you could look down at the county and census tract to see what your area looks like as well. Next slide, please. So other updates is that the Census Bureau has asked us to continue to push hiring. So if you do have folks who will be looking for jobs, please send them to 2020census.gov jobs. Hopefully this will help alleviate some of the stress many of our community members are feeling if they can secure a census job. Again, the jobs are well paying, they're flexible, and they help your community. And so they also have included more updates on folks who have already gotten a job offer and what they should be expecting. I also wanted to share that the Census Bureau created a COVID-19 site, which I will link in the chat. And the idea behind it is that they offer kind of two different dashboards. One is about the impact that COVID-19 has had on states, counties, and cities. And the other one is kind of a demographic and economic analysis. I found these to be really helpful, especially if you need to pull down data for maybe you work for a state representative and they're trying to make an argument about something that they need in their community. This is a great way to pull data very quickly. And it does so in a way that you kind of get the most important and salient bits that you might need. And with that, I think that's all that I have for today. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And in the meantime, I'll throw in the links to these different pieces in the chat.
Thank you so much, Genesis. And again, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A function. But if not, we'll move right along and pass it over to Dr. Lila Valencia to walk us through the data in Texas.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to share just the latest response rate data with you. But I wanted to ask a really quick question. Genesis, I think, or just make a clarification. I think you mentioned that there was like either a population of about 5 million in Texas that were in the update leave universe. And I think it's about 3.5% of Texas households that are expected to receive update leave information from the Census Bureau, which is still a significant number of housing units. It's about 360,000 housing units. but I think the population may be a little bit lower than that. I just wanted to clarify because the update leave universe is absolutely of, critical importance in the state of Texas, but there is so much that is left to be done in our urban areas and in other parts of the state where we don't have the update leave program. So if you have any other information, Genesis, that you want to discuss about that, please, maybe we can do that at the end of this, but I just wanted to clarify my understanding of the update leave universe.
Oh, no, you have it exactly right, Dr. Valencia. So the 5 million refers to the US stateside, not just Texas.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I was wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay,
and I
great.
think, yeah, you touched on a really important point that although this is a really significant operation, and for most of us, the reason that we want to make sure to share this information is because, of course, if people start to come knock on the door, we want to know when and where. However, when you do look at Texas and you look at these big metropolitan areas, many of them are not covered by update leave, but still have lower self-response rates than the national response rate or even the Texas response rate. When you look at them as well, many of them have already received 2 questionnaires in the mail. So we still have a lot of work to do. And I think Dr. Valencia hit it on the nail.
Thanks, Genesis. Yeah, I misheard you there. If you wouldn't mind, Katie, moving on to the next slide. These are just the links to the tools that I'll be covering with the self-response update. Again, it's the Census Bureau's self-response map, the CUNY map that Genesis shared in her presentation, and then also the Census Bureau's Tableau dashboard. Next slide, please. So as you probably may have seen, because these data are actually updated daily, but on Sundays, we don't really get an update until, Monday after this presentation. And so right now, as of the 9th of May, our Texas response rate was 53.1%. We are now ranked at 40th among US states. Minnesota maintains the lead with over 68% of response rate. And then the US overall is at 58.5% response rate. And they've enumerated 86.4 million households, with about 6.4 million of those here in the state of Texas. Next slide, please. So in Texas, at the county level, what we are seeing is that we now have an increasing number of Texas counties that have reached that important milestone of more than 50% response rate. So we have about 58 counties now, and we have a couple that are really close to that 50% mark. Terry County, which is southeast of Lubbock, had the highest daily increase in the last couple of days. And what we're seeing geographically on the map is that the population triangle, in particular, it's suburban ring counties, as well as parts of Randall, Lubbock, San Angelo, Taylor, and El Paso County are also doing really well and really boosting the overall response rate for the state of Texas. Next slide, please. What we are seeing now, though, is that our average daily increase in response to the 2020 census has actually started to drop from the initial data collection. Pre-census day average, so before the census, when you can see that these lines are a lot taller, our average daily increase in response was about 1.9. Our overall average daily increase now is about 0.8 percentage points. But really, if we look after census day, our average on our daily increase average is 0.4 percentage points. And what we're finding is that that gap between those two lines, those two blue lines, the US response rate and the Texas response rate, has actually started to widen. And so while we began response in behind the national average when we started collecting these data in March 19th, now that gap was smaller than it is now. So day one, we were about 2.9 percentage points behind the national average. We are now 5.4 percentage points below the national average. So that gap has actually been increasing, which means that other states are improving in their daily response, whereas the state of Texas has been sort of lagging and falling farther behind the national average because of that. Next slide, please. So here are the dashboard views that I kind of wanted to share with you today. Again, when we look at the rankings of the counties and the cities in Texas, what we're seeing is really that the suburban ring counties and suburban cities are really the highest performers in terms of response rate. So you see that Rockwall County is still, and it's right in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, is still in the lead with over 65% response rate. Mountain City is actually a city in Hays County or close to the city of San Marcos, and they have over 83.8% of their housing units counted or responded. When we start to sort of just look at the highest population centers of the state, and so I filtered the population range to about 500,000 and above, what we are finding is that the response rates are a little bit lower, but they're still very high for the larger counties. And what we are seeing among the largest cities is that El Paso is has a real strong lead over the other large cities in Texas, and they have about a 57.6% response rate. Houston is really close to reaching that 50% threshold. And so I'm going to show you in a couple of slides sort of what I've been doing to kind of incentivize or motivate some of these local communities to increase their response rates. If you'll go on to the next slide, please. So here, what I'm posting is just information again on the Census Response Rate Challenge Toolkit that the Census Bureau has put together. These tools with the response rate maps and the response rate rankings are really easy to share on your social media. And the Census Bureau also has little badges that just images that you can use in your social media posts. And I just posted an example of, on May 5th, I posted how we had about 45 counties with over 50% response rate. And I challenged Galveston County and Brazos County and Fannin County to join those counties because their response rates were fairly close to that milestone. And then we can see that, we then get Brazos County retweeting that and really challenging their community to respond. And they did so the next day. It wasn't even by the end of the week. The next day they had reached that 50% response rate challenge. And so I just encourage you to follow us on social media at Texas Demography, share our daily posts of the response rates. I'll keep challenging individual localities when I see that they're response rates are getting close to a certain milestone or things like that. And so I encourage you to retweet that, get out there in your community and kind of encourage them to help us get there. And so that's just another way that you can sort of, generate some energy around the census during the time where we're really kind of starting to lag in these response rates. Next slide, please. And then I encourage you to continue to use our map and dashboard to really sort of understand, what may be happening in some of your communities. When we look at some of the census tracts where we're seeing very high response rates, what we're finding right now in the state of Texas is that there's a strong correlation between being in an area that has high internet connectivity, right? And so if you receive that initial internet first invitation from the Census Bureau, that area is more likely to have a higher response rate. Clearly the infrastructure is in place. People are able to just get on their phone or go on their computer and respond easily. We're also finding that areas that are, less diverse, more homogeneous, also tend to have higher response rates. But it would be, interesting to, I know that there are other places in throughout the state that are looking at specific census tracts and initiating, certain activities to get out the count, and then looking back to see, how did response rates, perform after we put this initiative in place. And so this can help you sort of, track those data, but also, be able to look at different social characteristics that determine whether an area is hard to count. And so if you have any questions while you're using the tool, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to sit down and have a conversation with you about it. And I hope you find it useful. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to share that with us. And I think that's the last slide, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lila. And again, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in that chat box or in the Q&A box, and we will get to them as soon as possible. But it looks like we don't have any current questions, but folks, Genesis did put in the chat box just those different links that she was talking about during her presentation, so make sure you check those out. Oh, looks like we do have one question. Genesis, can you field that question for us, please?
Karen asks, sorry, I missed the first presentation. What are different minority communities doing? Katie's actually about to start answering this and going over some of the things we're working on.
And thanks, Genesis. Okay, now this is the moment that I have been so excited to share out with everyone. I know over the past several weeks, Lila has been sharing out the self-response data in Texas, and it's not exactly where we would like it to be, and we just haven't had that energy and momentum since Census Day. And so we pulled folks on this call. We've been talking to partners across the state, and we put our heads together to think about how can we recreate some of that Census Day energy. And so today I'm very excited to walk you through a preview of what we have been calling Census Day 2.0, but very excited to officially change the name of that into the Texas Counts Road Trip. So this, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be going on a Texas-sized road trip. So what we're going to do right now is break down the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the Texas Counts Road Trip to give you a little bit more information about what I'm talking about. So first, what is this? So we are going to virtually visit all regions of Texas to bring awareness to the census, but also celebrate what makes each region unique. So I know that many of us probably had summer plans to go on a trip, and those have been canceled because of COVID-19, and we're practicing safe social distancing and isolation. And so this is a way for us, for our communities, our families and friends, to take a virtual road trip throughout Texas to learn about what makes each region unique, but also a way to promote the census. And so we'll be visiting all the places that make Texas from the comfort and safety of our homes. So when are we planning on doing this? Our goal is to launch this road trip in early June. And the way we're going to do this is by highlighting a different region or regions each day of the week from Monday through Friday. And so instead of just focusing on one day, this is going to be a week-long event, again, celebrating what makes Texas unique and special, but also promoting the 2020 census. And as you know, Texas is really, really big. It's 254 counties big. And so as much as we would love to highlight each region on a specific day, we will be doing a little bit of overlap. But don't worry, we're going to make sure every region does get a chance to shine during this road trip. So who's invited on our road trip? You're invited along with 29 million of your closest friends, AKA everyone in Texas. And so similar to Census Day, this is going to be an all hands on deck operation in Texas, meaning that you, the folks that you engage with, community members, we want everyone to be aware of this road trip, getting involved. And so some questions that we're asking ourselves is, one, who needs to hear about the census? who has been undercounted, but also who are some influencers in our region that we can connect with and engage to help us promote the census. And also who are those trusted messengers in our community as well. And so again, basically we're trying to get everyone and anyone involved in the census, whether they're helping us share the message or they're needing to hear the message themselves to fill out the form for their household. Where is this happening? Online, everywhere. So we're going to be utilizing different digital platforms to share out content. And so what does that mean? And so, as I said, we'll be highlighting a different region of Texas each day of the week. And so maybe that looks like a Facebook Live for story time with a librarian from Abilene, or maybe a Zoom meeting with organizers and families in the RGV, or maybe we're going on a virtual beach trip in Galveston via Instagram stories, or maybe there's a TikTok competition between kids in Dallas and in Houston promoting the census. Basically, we have the opportunity to be creative as possible, while also thinking about, again, how we can really highlight how amazing our regions and how unique they are in Texas, while also promoting the 2020 census. So, how are we going to do this? And so again, this is a week of organized fun. So each day of the week, we'll highlight a different region or regions. During those days, we'll have regional voices that will lead and share Get Out the Count content. And so of course, we'll have organized programming throughout the day. So again, maybe that is a librarian from Abilene doing a story time that Texas children can tune into and hear a story during the course of the day. Or maybe that is bringing a bunch of educators together and organizing them online via a Zoom call. And so again, we'll have very specific organized programming, but we also want to make sure that folks who might not necessarily be part of that organized part also promoting the road trip. So that means a very robust social media campaign. And so even if maybe your organization or community group isn't part of that organized programming, we're all going to be sharing the same hashtags and content, so we can really bring all of this material together to share out with folks across the state of Texas. And so while our regional voices are leading and sharing this content, Texans will tune in and promote as well. And so again, each day we're highlighting a different region, we're celebrating that region, but we're also tuning in and learning a little bit more about what makes that region unique and special, while also promoting folks to fill out the census. And last but not least, because we are doing this from a regional perspective, this gives us a little bit of room for a really friendly competition between the regions. And so let's see which region working together can get their self-response rates to go up. Again, we are still very much the team I'm working with, kind of behind the scenes working on the plan. And so we wanted to share a brief overview of what it was going to look like, but the detailed plan is coming very, very soon. And then you might be asking, why are we doing this? And the short and simple answer is because every Texan counts. But also we deserve a little bit of fun during this time. And so we know that over half of invited Texan households have filled out the census, which is really, really exciting. But we also know there's still some ways to go. And so let's build some census day level momentum and get all of our households to respond, again, while having a little bit of fun while we're virtually visiting regions across Texas. In terms of next steps, there's a couple of things that we're doing and that we're going to be asking you to do. And so very soon, later this week, we'll be sharing the regional breakdown. And so I know that we can kind of slice and dice Texas in different ways, but for this purpose, we're going to break our counties into different regions so you know what day of the week will be yours. We'll also be sharing out a detailed daily/weekly plan for what that will look like. That's going to come a little bit later, but do know as plans start to solidify, we will be sharing it out because we are planning to do this in early June. And then we'll also be sending out an interest form to folks on this call and folks in the Texas Counts Network. And essentially, we just want to know what your interest is in getting involved and making sure that we're really bringing in voices that are on the ground doing this work and highlighting the amazing work that you're doing, but also how amazing your region of Texas is as well. And so we'll be asking for folks to really step up into some leadership roles as we get this underway. So look out for that interest form coming very, very soon to your inbox, probably in the next day or two. In terms of your assignments, I do have a couple of questions that I want to get y'all brainstorming and starting to think about. And so first and foremost, who do we need to target in your community or region, and think about how can we reach them. And so when we look at the data, we can see in our communities where those lower self-response rates are, and using that information, let's think strategically about how we can get these undercounted communities or low response communities to really turn out during this week in June. In addition to that, I want y'all to start thinking about who are those influencers and trusted voices in your community. And so again, thinking about those targeted hard to count communities or folks that might not be responding to the census, how can we engage them? Who are they going to listen to? And so start thinking about who you would like to engage in this process. And maybe it is an elected official, maybe it's your local librarian, maybe it's a principal, maybe it's an abuela on the block who the kids like to go over to her house. Whoever you want to really elevate on this day, please let us know so we can get them involved in this effort. And I also want you to think about what makes your community special. And so, yes, we're promoting the 2020 census, we're getting out the count, but also Texas is the landscape and regions of Texas are as diverse as the people who live here. And so we really want to highlight some really exciting things that are happening in your community. So maybe you're out in West Texas and you want to take us on a virtual tour of Big Bend, or maybe we're in Houston and we have some local musicians who are sharing out about why the census is important to them. So again, think about what makes your area special, what makes it unique, and how can we promote and share that in a fun and creative way while also promoting the 2020 census. And then last but not least, the interest form is coming very soon. Like I said, we'll get that into your inbox in the next day or two to get a little bit more information about what your involvement might look like in this road trip, as well as what those next steps will be. So I just shared out a lot of information about the road trip, and we'll make sure that, again, we share out these slides and the recording of the presentation, as well as a little bit more detailed information. But do know next week and kind of going forward during the Texas Counts weekly update, we'll be sharing out information about kind of the latest about what's happening with our road trip. But do know we're about a month away from doing this road trip together across the state of Texas, and really hoping that folks on the call and maybe not on the call are interested in getting involved. Okay, so that's kind of the formal content that we have right now. And like I said, we'll definitely be following up about the Texas Counts road trip. And so now I want to open it up to any questions, comments, concerns that y'all have about operations, about the self-response numbers in Texas, but also if you have any questions about outreach or, of course, the Texas Counts census road trip.
So Katie, I'll answer, or I'll share some of what's been thrown in the Q&A. So Karen clarified her question. She said, not what are groups doing, but how are their response rates varying? And so I'm sorry, I misread that original question, but Katie's gonna send out the slides and recording after the webinar. And so you can see those response rates there that Dr. Valencia shared earlier. And then Kimberly shares, how about engaging the mayors, leaders of chambers, etc. of the competing regions to have a friendly bet? I think this is a great idea as well. Katie and I have also talked about how to kind of up the ante and where maybe potentially we could have a little bit of friendly competition, either within a day or across the week. We know a lot of people feel a lot of pride for their individual cities. And so what can we do to kind of use that to our advantage, right? To get people to respond. And I think that's it. So I think if we want to hold out for maybe a few more minutes, if any other people, oh, Natalie asked, is a road trip a way to lead up to Census Day 2.0? And if so, will the new Census Day be in June as well? So Katie, I think that Katie, do you want to answer this?
Yes. So when let me clarify, because I said we've been kind of using the term Census Day 2.0 very liberally. And so Census Day will and always will be April 1st. We know that's an anchor date in terms of responding to the census questionnaire. And so when we were referring to Census Day 2.0, it was really a way of thinking about how can we gain some momentum? How can we regain that energy that we had in terms of self-response rates on April 1st. And so that's where we kind of hatched the idea of a Census Day 2.0, or basically just a large statewide push to get out the count. And so our hope is that through this week in June, probably going to be the second week in June, we are going to be raising that self-response rate in our state, because we will be having folks from every corner of Texas engaging in get out the count efforts. And so again, this is a way to build the similar momentum that we had on Census Day, because we will all be tuning in, we'll all be using the same census messaging, and we'll all be engaging folks in our communities to get out the count. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Katie, and I'll just add, when the Census Bureau did their 1 month out on May 1st, and that weekend, weekend of action for the 1 month out from Census Day, there was definitely an increase in response for the state of Texas, as well as for other states, in particular for other states. In fact, this is when we dropped back to number 40 in terms of our comparison to other U.S. states, because everybody else also did really well during that time. And so having something that's specific to Texas that can really energize people around responding to the census, I think could be really critical for Texas, and really work to improve that response rate in a unique way for Texas that we may not be seeing in other states at that same point in time.
And then Sarah asks, will the road trip include programming, campaign material that is focused on certain groups that are undercounted versus just regions, for example, youth and young adults, LGBTQ+, Black communities, etc.? The answer to that question, Sarah, is yes. In addition to highlighting regions, the programming throughout the day will also be focused on communities that are undercounted. And so we'll be sure to include a program that is specific to that. And that is definitely a conversation that we've been having as well. So thank you for raising that, and know that we're planning to include that and engage folks who work closely with those communities as well.
Katie, there's also another question in the Q&A. So Karen asks, she says, thank you. Now that self-response is stretching out, how are you reaching out to rural communities that may not be able to access a virtual tour?
Great question, Karen. And we are still kind of working out at the kinks to the plan. But we were talking about this in a conversation last week. And so we know, again, that maybe folks don't have access to reliable internet. And so instead of having folks join us online, we'll be engaging organizations, community leaders in more rural spaces, and encouraging them to get out the count in terms of allowable in-person activities. And so maybe that's on that week they're putting up yard signs throughout their community, or maybe they're handing out pamphlets at essential locations. And so again, we're still a lot of this is digital, because that's kind of the stage we're at right now, but we're also hoping to engage communities that might not have access to internet. And so those on the ground, boots on the ground folks will be doing census engagement activities, or get out the count activities on the ground. And so again, kind of similar to Census Day, to where we were all promoting the census through a variety of different ways. We're hoping to have that same type of energy and involvement throughout the course of this week as well. And then, just amplifying and highlighting those efforts throughout the course of the week.
Thanks, Katie. Santiago also adds, it activates local perspectives and distinctions, yet reflects our common goal. And it also provides a lot of doable ways for individuals, organizations, and communities to participate. Thank you, Santiago, for that feedback. Really appreciate it. I think that's all for now. So if there are any other questions or comments, we'll keep hearing them. We still have some time. It looks like we might be off a little bit early today. But as always, as Katie has shared here on the screen, you guys have our contact information. So if you want to reach out to any one of us on these individual pieces, please feel free to do so. We're more than happy to work and collaborate with you. And I'm sure Katie will also be sharing more information about the road trip and in a short while. Sorry, Katie, do you want to add more on that?
No, I would just say we're moving full steam ahead on the plans for the road trip, but obviously we cannot do this without your help and support. And so, as I said, in the next day or two, be expecting an email in your inbox, just a general interest form. And the team that I'm working with will be meeting throughout the course of this week and putting and fine tuning some of the planning. And again, we're really hoping to engage leaders on the ground to help us get this up and going. And so we'll be reaching out to folks who are interested very, very soon, as well as promoting. We'll be creating a toolkit and sharing the itinerary and agenda. So more to come soon. But first things first is look out for that interest form in your inboxes in the next day or two.
Hi, Katie and Genesis. I see a couple other comments or questions that came up in the last couple of minutes.
Oh, you're right, Dr. Valencia. Okay, so we have a question from Ramona. I have a question concerning about the hand-delivered packets. Do you know if the census will hand-deliver to the hard-to-count areas on the rural areas and PO boxes? So the idea behind these hand-delivered packets is that, yes, they will be hand-delivered to these rural areas if they are part of the Update Leave universe. So if you look at one of the maps that we mentioned on the call, the idea is that in those areas, they will receive some kind of packet, and that packet will be internet choice. So the idea is that the Bureau still wants these folks to try to get on the internet to respond. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if Dr. Valencia wants to add anything to that.
I guess the only thing I would add is that the part of the determination used to categorize an area as Update Leave is the number of PO boxes and connectivity, right? And so for sure, where there is a large share of PO boxes, then they're in the Update Leave universe because of that. And then a lot of the social characteristics of the hard-to-count population that lives in rural areas, you know, those characteristics are taken into account in why they're hard to count, right? Because of connectivity issues and being in areas that are more rural. And so some of them will be in those Update Leave areas. That's how they were defined to receive their packet in that way. So there's a lot of overlap in that. But if there is a specific area that you're looking for to understand how they were invited, those maps that Genesis and I shared will definitely get you that information.
Thank you, Dr. Valencia. And then Jordan asks, we are hearing from many folks that think that they can't take the census because they lost their census ID. I know there's a PDF about this on the Census Bureau's website. Are there any Texas Count specific materials that include the direction on how to take the census without a census ID? Katie, do you guys have anything like that?
There isn't currently, but I imagine if it would be really helpful, we can definitely put together something a little bit short and sweet in terms of responding to the census without an ID. So we can probably pull something together.
Thank you, Katie. And I'll also add, if you do have issues with, if you're hearing from community members who have tried to respond and without a census ID and they were told that they couldn't, please let us know. It has always been the case that folks can respond without a census ID. And we were hearing that there were some issues with that earlier. And it looks like Crystal threw in a link to, I'm not quite sure what this is, but this might have to do with that unique ID, but as Katie mentioned, if it's something that's useful, they can definitely mock that up. And then Maria asks, is internet instruction for update leave same as regular internet census response? Yes, so the packets are essentially the same. The packets that are hand delivered in the update leave universe are internet choice, which means that the Bureau understands that internet connectivity is a little more difficult. So they actually leave a questionnaire in these packets with the intention that maybe that whoever receives them will actually fill it out via paper and they'll send back the response in the mail. But the instructions are the same. The only thing that we have heard from the Bureau ask is that if there is a large universe that if you and your community have a large universe of update leave, to have them wait until they receive their census ID. And so the follow-up question is, can I give the same internet instructions or do I need to tweak it? No, the internet instructions are the same. The packets are the same. It's just a process of hand delivering them that is different. I think that might be all the questions that we have. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to one or all of us. We're more than happy to continue any of these pieces that you might need more assistance with. And then I'll give it back to Katie.
Thanks, Genesis. And again, thanks everyone for joining us for this week's Texas Counts Weekly Update. As always, we will be sure to send out the recording and slides as well as any of the links that were shared as well on a follow-up email. But just a big, big thank you for your continual efforts in getting out the count in Texas. And I am so excited to visit each of your regions and communities through the census road trip. And so, as I said, more information coming very soon, but excited to undertake this road trip with everyone. So thank you again for joining us. Stay safe. Hope you and your families and friends are well during this time, and we will connect again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.